Today we will learn how to read chemical formulas. Our question of the day is, what are some chemical formulas that you already know? This is H2O, an example of a compound. Notice how here you have the element symbol for hydrogen and the element symbol for oxygen. Each new capital letter represents an element. Just like in math, the number in front is called the coefficient. In this case, the coefficient is 5. The coefficient tells you the number of molecules. The small number at the bottom is called the subscript. The subscript tells you the number of atoms for the element before it. So here, the subscript 2 tells us that we have 2 hydrogen atoms. Here, we do not have a subscript on oxygen. That means that there is only 1 oxygen atom. We do not write the subscript 1. Now, let's look at some practice. First, let's circle a molecule. This is a molecule. Now, we are going to point an arrow at an oxygen atom. Since water is H2O, then the one that we only have one of, the blue, must be the oxygen. Now, let's put a star on a hydrogen atom. Well, since there are 2 hydrogen atoms in a water molecule, the red must be the hydrogen. So, what is the total number of molecules? If we count, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 molecules. Now, let's try counting the total number of hydrogen atoms. Well, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hydrogen atoms. Now, let's try counting the number of oxygen atoms. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 oxygen atoms. Sometimes our chemical formula will have parentheses. Parentheses in a formula are treated the same way as in algebra. You can multiply to find the total number of atoms. So in this case, the calcium is not in parentheses, so we only have 1. The oxygen is in parentheses, so we're going to multiply that imaginary number 1 after the oxygen by the 2 outside of the parentheses. And so there are 2 oxygen atoms. We're going to do the same for hydrogen and multiply the 2 outside of parentheses by the imaginary 1 inside. And once again, we're going to have 2 for the number of hydrogens. When we have a coefficient, it is applied to all of the atoms in the molecule. And we always multiply by the coefficient. So here we have 3 times the 1 calcium to give us a total of 3 calciums. Then we have 1 oxygen times 2 outside is 2 times 3 is 6. Once again, 1 times 2 is 2 times 3 is 6. Now pause the video and try the show what you know problems. First, let's look at Na2S. The subscript 2 tells us we have 2 sodium atoms. And the sulfur does not have a subscript, so the subscript is 1. Now, let's look at number 2. There are 3 LiOH molecules. There is no subscript on Li, so there is 1 lithium atom per molecule. With 3 molecules, this means that 1 times 3 is 3 lithium atoms in total. Once again, with the oxygen, we have no subscript, so we use the subscript 1, and 1 times 3 is 3. The hydrogen also does not have a subscript, so 1 times 3 gives us 3. Now let's look at number 3, magnesium phosphate. Notice how the magnesium has a subscript of 3. Notice how there is a parenthesis around the PO4. This means that although there is no subscript on P, meaning there's only one phosphorus, we will need to multiply by the 2 outside parentheses, so 1 times 2 gives us a total of 2 phosphorus atoms. Now we're going to look at oxygen. Notice how there is a subscript of 4 on the oxygen, and it is inside parentheses. So 4 times 2 gives us 8 oxygen atoms. Now let's look at number 4. There are 5 CaCl2s. Well, since there's no subscript on Ca, we're going to use 1, and 1 times 5 gives us 5. For the Cl2, there are 2 chlorine atoms multiplied by 5 molecules for a total of 10 chlorine atoms. Now let's look at number 5. Here we have a 3 subscript on our Ni, and we have a 3 coefficient, so 3 times 3 will give us 9. For phosphorus, we do not have a subscript, so we will use 1. Since phosphorus is inside of parentheses, we will need to multiply by 2, and since this coefficient is 3, we will also need to multiply by 3. 1 times 2 is 2, times 3 is 6. Now let's look at oxygen. There is a subscript of 4 on the oxygen, and the oxygen is inside parentheses. Not to mention there's also a coefficient, so we will need to multiply all 3 numbers together. So 4 times 2 is 8, times 3 is 24. There are 24 oxygen atoms here.